Well, today we're going to continue watching the video presentation called Roman City. And I think we're kind of in the middle of a story at the time last week when we finished up. So we'll pick that up. I'll back it up a little bit just so you can remember what was going on. So here we are once again, Roman City.
Collected one here. The water from the central reservoir. My servant will collect the one here. This is tyranny! He is bleeding us dry! Well, Marcus, what do you say of your friend Lycinus now? Lycinus is indeed a snake.
Gaius, you must tell Caesar Augustus. You supported him in the civil wars, and he is known to be loyal to those loyal to him.
I will write to Rome this very night.
Augustus receives many letters. You must go to Rome, and take with you a citizen to bear witness, so it will be clear this is no personal argument. Someone honest and without guile.
I know just the one. It's a tremendous honor that Gaius Valerius has asked me to accompany him to Rome. But I cannot imagine being in the presence of the great emperor himself. Though a citizen of the empire, I had never been to Mother Rome herself. And nothing could have prepared me for the spectacle. We attended a chariot race at the Circus Maximus. I knew you should have bet on the red team. I have been to gladiatorial matches before, but none as thrilling as the one in Rome. I knew you should have bet on the one with the trident. The next day, I journeyed to the residence of Augustus atop the Palatine Hill. I was surprised by the modest scale of the emperor's house. Gaius Valerius, my loyal friend, and citizen Marcus Fabricius, you have acted with a public spirit befitting all true Romans. Go with our thanks, and next month, during our tour of inspection in Gaul, we shall have our decision. It was the best possible news. The emperor would address our problem when he came to Gaul. I know we will have a satisfactory outcome. Your faith is reassuring, Master. Stories came back to us that Caesar Augustus met with Lycinus in Marseille. And what have you to say to these charges, Lycinus? There are rumors that monies collected in my name have not reached my treasury.
I have gathered this money purposely, great Caesar, to construct a temple on Bobonia's Forum dedicated in your honor.
And so, for his good work, Lycinus was promoted back to Rome as the emperor's official food taster to protect him from poisoning. Here, his formidable epicurian skills can be devoted to the public good. With the taxes removed, now perhaps we can run our lives and businesses in peace. I hope my wife will like the linen I brought from Rome. That woman has such high standards. a cloudless sky? Look there! Blackbirds circling in the wrong direction. I don't like these portents. Let us get back to the villa. These woods are not safe at night.
And have insulted our home, our family, and the dignity of Rome.
These camps will soon see they are no match for the power of Rome. Let the Druids no more go! Guards from areas were the cause of war. His measures were swift and harsh, not only against Druids, but against all the Druids. Petrobulvius was sent to labour in the quarries, an example to his countrymen. Now I see no hope of bringing our peoples back together. By the spirit of the significant soul of Roman the Gaul, we will be avenged! The mighty Augustus is coming to Babylonia, but he will not leave! We will be avenged! We will be avenged!
This is the Plaza of the Corporations in Ostia, a long four-sided promenade built by the local shipping businesses for the pleasure and comfort of the citizenry. Those businesses imported wheat from Egypt, oil and wine from Spain, fish sauce from Portugal, iron ore from the mines of Gaul, and even wild animals from Africa. And in the mosaics which cover the pavement, we can see their corporate logos. Attracting regional and international trade was one of the prime reasons for establishing the city, but not the only one. They were also the centers of culture, and the people strolling this pleasant concourse would probably hear during an intermission from one of the most popular spots in town, the theater. Romans loved spectator events, but only cities were large enough to build, support, and fill theaters. Like so much else, the Romans borrowed most of their dramatic themes from the Greeks, modifying them to suit their own tastes and sensibilities. They produced comedies, tragedies, musical revues. They brought in acrobats, jugglers, pantomimes, and orators to lecture on honor, duty, country, and of course, the glory of being Roman. Virtually all communities had a theater, and some were quite large and impressive. This theater in Orange, France, could hold 10,000 people. It was a gift from Augustus, whose heroic statue still adorns the rear stage wall, decorated with elaborate marble columns. The theater was a popular form of entertainment, drawing many people from the city and the surrounding countryside. But the really big crowds came to the amphitheaters. This huge amphitheater is in Nîmes, not far from Orange. It could easily hold the 24,000 spectators who came here to watch the games. When you first entered the amphitheater, you started in this covered passageway, which rings the entire arena. You get to your seats through these barrel-vaulted tunnels. Some go up to the cheap seats, others go down to the box seats, closer to the action. Like a modern stadium, this is the area where you'd find the snack bars and public toilets. This barrel vault above me does two things. First of all, it creates a covered passageway, but second, it acts as an extended arch to support the tremendous weight above. An amphitheater is actually a circle of barrel vaults that narrow as they lead to the arena. These are connected to rings of passageways that allow movement around the entire structure. The system was so efficient that the whole place could be emptied in 15 minutes. Stone seats rested on top of these vaults, and along the back wall, was a series of masts which were rigged to hold a massive canopy called a balloon. We can still see the mast holes for the Valerian. It was so large that companies of sailors were kept on duty just to hoist it into position. The Valerian provided shade for the patrons from the hot Mediterranean sun so they could better enjoy the spectacle. Brilliant architecture and engineering, all in the service of some of the most depraved notions of entertainment the world has ever known. This is the most famous stadium in the world, the most famous stadium in history, the Colosseum of Rome. As we can see, it still packs the room. I'm in the basement area below the floor of the arena, where people and animals were kept in elaborate staging areas. Using hoists and elevators, they were raised up through trapdoors, appearing as if by magic, much to the delight of all. On game days, trained gladiators fought a series of deadly ritualistic duels. Condemned prisoners were executed in a variety of ingenious ways. And other unfortunates, such as defeated enemies, were torn apart by savage and exotic beasts. By nightfall, hundreds of people and animals were dead. Why the Romans possessed such a passionate appetite for public pain and slaughter is not an easy question to answer. Many believed order was being maintained when violent criminals were put to death publicly. And the games certainly fit into the Romans' highly militaristic spirit. Another possibility is that the ancient Romans saw so much dying around them, they simply raised its inevitability to a symbolic level, perhaps to make it less fearsome. But whatever the reason, the games were enmeshed in custom and ritual and became the most popular event in Roman society. So as you might imagine, amphitheater and theater construction was encouraged wherever the Romans settled.
From all reports, the progress of Augustus through Gaul has been most triumphant. But for me, there can be no rejoicing until we're all...
The daughter of the Celtic chieftain.
You must help him, Marcus Fabricius.
But what can I do?
You say he is your friend.
But I am powerless.
What? You want to see Caesar?
Tell him it's Marcus Fabricius, that he received me in Rome. So, you wish me to pardon this Celt acrobatics? If you please, great Caesar, Acco has committed no crime, and I know this gesture on your part would do more than all of Gaius Valerius' harsh measures.
What's this all about?
He's to be released.
On whose orders?
Caesar Augustus himself.
Oh, Marcus, you were wonderful.
I am in your debt, Marcus Fabricius. We each must do what we can.
Yes, we must.
And tomorrow, in the forum, when he makes an offering at the temple, that is when we shall strike. And in recognition of the loyalty and bravery of your daughter, I bestow upon you and your family the full citizenship of Rome. From this day hence your name shall be Gaius Julius Acco, and you shall be known as Julia.
What's wrong with Aidan?
Now that she was a Roman, I was free to ask her to be my wife. Julia, now that you are
Marcus Fabricius, in recognition of your loyalty and splendid achievement in the building of Livonia, I hereby appoint you supervising architect for all of our new cities on the Phoenician frontier.
Congratulations, Marcus. Good work.
Now that he was a Roman citizen, Achabubius moved from his hilltop to my house in time. In recognition of the great honor accorded me by the emperor, I granted Lawrence his freedom and a modest pension. That'll buy me a villa in the south of Gaul. At least I don't have to go to Phoenicia.
Oh, Marcus, I wish.
And so do I.
Along Roman roads like this one came the ideas and commerce that brought a facade of cultural unity to the diverse peoples of the ancient world. Eventually, people from conquered territories became senators, governors, and generals, dressing like Romans, thinking like Romans. In an agricultural world, the city was the crucible of thought and change, a role it would continue to play throughout history. At public temples and in the quiet of their homes, average Romans prayed to the gods to protect their cities. In Pompeii, and here in Herculaneum, we can see some of the touches that show how important it was to the Romans that their cities be livable. No private buildings were so high that they blocked all the light from coming into the street, and people who owned buildings on the main streets built roofs and balconies over the sidewalk for the shade and comfort of pedestrians. And notice the elevated sidewalks here at Pompeii. They prevented people from being run over by carts and horses. And these stones not only allowed them to cross the street without stepping into anything, they also served as the world's first speed bumps, since carts would have to slow down to get past them. And look at these grooves made by the carts that travel down these roads over the years. But perhaps the most interesting Roman idea about cities was the stated desire to keep them small. From archaeological evidence, it is clear the city fathers had trouble practicing this theory. Almost all Roman cities quickly outgrew their original plans and needed new aqueducts and sewers and other city services. But Roman engineers, those masters of order and control, knew that a city worked best when it was designed for a given number of people. Once that number was reached, the plan was to build a new city, rather than to stretch and strain the surfaces of the old one. Too bad that idea didn't catch on.
The Romans possessed a total vision of life. Much of it was brutal and repulsive, but part of it was brilliant and progressive. Roman achievement in engineering, architecture, and politics was dependent on order and superb organization. And when that order broke down, as it did in the declining centuries of the empire, everything began to decay.
But at its height, nothing in the Western world came close to Roman technology and city planning. And it was almost 1,500 years after the collapse of the empire before the world would begin to see its like again.
Boy, did you find that interesting? Somewhat informative, hopefully, as well. Yeah, a lot of times you can learn more from watching a presentation like that than a lot of lectures. That doesn't take away from having lectures, because since we have some time left, well, let's dive back into looking at the successors to Caesar Augustus, whom we saw portrayed here in this presentation. So we'll find out a little bit more about the emperors who came after Caesar Augustus. Okay, looks like everybody's in their place, ready to go. The successors of Augustus. One thing we need to understand as we look at these successors is that the quality of leadership among his successors remained rather incompetent until the end of the 1st century, when generals in the Roman army began to be elevated to the throne. So we're going to see in those immediate successors that they are going to be people who are not good rulers. They're going to be people that are going to have a lot of flaws. But towards the end of the first century, we're going to find that generals begin to impose themselves into the role of emperor. And when that happens, the ruling gets better. The government of the empire improves. All right, so let's look through the different emperors, and we'll get an idea of who they are. The first one who comes after Caesar Augustus is Tiberius. He is Octavian's adopted son, or Augustus, and the son of Livia Drusilla, the second wife of Augustus. She had been married before and had this son, Tiberius. He was a depraved individual, very sinful and brutal. However, he was an efficient administrator who got the job done by force. Tiberius built a great palace on the island of Capri and spent the last 10 years of his reign there. He didn't even live in Rome. He lived on this island, off away from everybody, except for those that he allowed there to be with him. In his latter years, there was much court intrigue, mostly concerning the succession. Who's going to come after him? So even though he left the empire in a healthy financial situation, there was great rejoicing when he died, because he was such an evil man. And one of the most notable things for him in his reign is that he happened to be the emperor, the Caesar, when Jesus was crucified. So, he did things like abolishing the assembly. He was a capable general before becoming Caesar, and he strengthened the empire. But he spent most of his time ruling on an island. Okay, you don't need all this. Just do I have some blanks in your notes? I don't remember what's there. Or it's just a blank area. Just a blank area. All right, you don't need to put all this. Just that he was a brutal man, a good administrator, but disliked, at least, if not hated, by the people. And you ought to put down that Jesus was crucified when he was ruling. So, Jesus was born when Caesar Augustus was the emperor, and he died when Augustus's stepson, adopted son Tiberius, was emperor. All right, any questions about Tiberius? All right, the next guy maybe you've heard of. Have you ever heard of Caligula? Anybody? No? Okay, well, he's a pretty famous emperor. As a young boy, and his name was Gaius Caesar, he was nicknamed Boots, or Caligula. That's a nickname because he hung around the army camps where his father was a general, and he liked to put on the soldiers' boots. You know, maybe when you were a kid, you remember walking around in your dad's shoes or his boots. Ever do that? Yeah, well, that's what Caligula did. So the soldiers nicknamed him Boots, or Caligula, and then they stuck with him. During the first year of his reign, he spent all of the wealth accumulated by his great uncle Tiberius. So he was the great nephew or grandnephew of Tiberius. Tiberius had no children, but he was a spender. He was well liked as a ruler, though. He seemed like a nice enough fellow. People liked him until at the age of 38, he suffered from an illness that seemed to have left him slightly insane. So you could just write down insane. That would be a good description. And from that point on, his reign was noted for its cruelty, torture, and licentiousness, or looseness. To satisfy his lust for wealth, he forced the rich to gamble with him. Those who did not lose to Caligula were in danger of losing their lives. So if you were a senator in Rome, you might be invited to one of his parties, expected to play poker with him, and expected to lose. After milking his victims of all their money, sometimes he would often force their friends to pay a ransom for their safe return. So after playing poker and losing, he might hold you for ransom and force your friends to pay in order to get you back, because he was so greedy trying to get money. He was also very interested in sexual activity, and at some of his parties forced senators' wives to engage in sexual relations with other men. He took a morbid pleasure in the suffering of others. He occasionally had people slowly tortured to death at banquets for entertainment. Toward the end of his reign, the demented Caligula even tried to get his horse elected consul.
Wait, what?
Remember the office of consul? It was the executive.
His horse?
His horse, he wanted to have elected consul. Yeah, he was nuts. It is thought that he also engaged in sexual relations with his sister and with many young women that, your brides, different. He just was a sexual pervert, is about the best you can say about it. He earned the Jews' hatred when he ordered his statue to be placed in the temple at Jerusalem. He was dissuaded from that, but eventually was assassinated in AD 41 by a cabal of the Praetorian Guard. Those were the soldiers that were like the Secret Service of its time. They were the ones that were to protect the emperor. And finally, this elite body of the emperor's personal bodyguards had had enough, and they assassinated him. They killed him. So that's Caligula. You can read through some of the other ideas that are here. Any questions about Caligula? You can see not only was he incompetent, but extremely sinful and evil. Well, with his assassination, he had no legitimate heirs, and so the story is that as the Praetorian Guard has killed Caligula, they're looking around for other members of the family, because oftentimes they would get killed too. And they found his uncle Claudius hiding behind a curtain. Now Claudius had acted as treasurer for Caligula, had done some different jobs for him, but Claudius always pretended, and I think he was pretending, to be a little bit slow of mind, because he didn't want Caligula to ever be suspicious that Claudius would be trying to take over the throne. And so he pretended as though he didn't understand as much. Well, I say pretend because after Caligula's death, Claudius proved that he was not slow of mind. And it seemed as though it was kind of a mocking thing when some of the Praetorian Guard found Claudius hiding behind a curtain, that he brought him out and said, "Here's our next emperor." And somehow they started to believe it. And so Claudius became the next emperor of Rome. Claudius was considered incompetent by many, but he was generally an efficient administrator. He is the one that authorized the invasion of Britain. Now, Julius Caesar had been there before, but Claudius invaded the island, and to gain the respect and loyalty of the army, he granted the soldiers the right to keep booty. So any possessions that the soldiers found from soldiers they defeated in battle, or any villages, they got to keep. His greatest faults were his persecution of Christians and allowing himself to be overly influenced by his wives, Messalina and Agrippina II. Now, as regards the persecution of Christians, it is not clear that that's who he had in mind, but we know that historically there came a time when he expelled all Jews from Rome because of disputations concerning the Messiah. Well, it seems likely that those disputations were concerning Jesus as the Messiah, because any Jewish leaders that were in Rome, any Pharisees that may have lived there, certainly would have objected to Christians coming into the synagogues and proclaiming Jesus. And one of the Roman historians says that the uproar was over a man that they called Chrestus. Well, I think he misspelled it. Chrestus was a common name of slaves. I think what he meant was Christos, which would be the Greek name for Christ or Messiah. And so because of this expulsion of Jews from Rome, and remember that at that time there was no distinction between Jews that were not Christians and Jews that were Christians. They were just Jews in the Romans' mind. And associated with that then, Christians began to call Claudius Antichrist. He's against Christ. So that's Claudius, and aside from what I've just told you, it looks like there's not much else that's on the screen there for you to know. So one more thing, we'll look at Suetonius. In his book, The 12 Caesars, he described Claudius this way: when he walked, his knees buckled, he had an indecent laugh, and even more disgusting, when he was angry, spittle flew from his mouth. His nose ran, his tongue stumbled, and his head wobbled with the slightest exertion. So you can see why somebody might have thought that he wasn't all there. But apparently he was. Well, we'll find out what happens to Claudius next time, and the continuation of the successors of Caesar Augustus. No assignment for tomorrow, just keep up with going over your notes.